It is a really exciting time to be a JavaScript developer. In the old days, companies used to need separate developers to work on their front end, their back end, their mobile apps, their databases, etc. since all of those required experience with different types of programming and different programming languages. But all of this has changed now. JavaScript can now be used to develop each of these platforms, meaning that one JavaScript developer can now create something that used to take an entire team. In this course, I'm going to show you how to create and deploy a full-stack React-powered blog website from scratch with user authentication. We'll start off by using React to create an interactive front end for our site, and then move on to writing a nodeJs server with Express tied in with MongoDB. After that, we're going to see how to add basic user authentication to our app, using a very helpful tool called Firebase Auth, and then we'll close out by seeing how to host this entire full-stack site that we've built on Google Cloud and access it from anywhere. To get the most out of this course, there are a few things that it would be helpful for you to know ahead of time. The first is that it would be helpful for you to have a basic knowledge of JavaScript and ideally, some experience with more modern JavaScript syntax such as ES6 and above. Now, if you're not already comfortable with JavaScript, it's not hard to learn. Just check out some of the courses on it in our library and come back here when you're done, or if you're feeling brave, feel free to just jump into this course anyway. Now it would also be helpful for you to have some basic experience with command line operations, and all we're really going to be using for this course are basic commands like make directory to make directories, cd to change directories, and ls to see the contents of a directory. So this is more just a nice to have that may come in handy for you. And finally, since many developers find that the React library does have a bit of a learning curve, it would be helpful for you to have some experience with the basics of React. Although you should be able to at least follow along with this course even if you don't have any React experience yet. Oh, and one last thing, I highly recommend that you follow along with me as I write code, or if you want to jump around a little bit. The beginning and end states for all the code that I write in this course are in the exercise files for your reference. So basically this course is for intermediate level developers who are looking to build their first full stack application with all the modern JavaScript technologies. If you happen to fit that description, and I think if you've made it this far then you do, then this course is definitely for you. Alright, so before we get started, let's install the tools necessary for this course. Now nodeJs is going to be a really important tool for running our code and installing a few libraries that we'll be using to make our programming easier. So, if you don't already have nodeJs installed, you can download the installer from nodeJs's website, which is nodejs.org, and what you're going to want to do probably is download the long-term support version, which is the LTS version over here. The version that you see might be a little different from the version that I see, but whatever this is over here, you're going to want to download that. And once you've downloaded that, you're just going to need to run the installer, and nodeJs should walk you through the rest. So once you've done all of that, just to make sure you've set up everything correctly, you're going to want to open up a terminal. And I'm using the built-in terminal in Visual Studio Code, which is the IDE that I'm going to be using in this course if you're interested in using it as well. And what you're going to need to do in order to check to make sure that node.js and npm are installed correctly is just run node v, and that will show you the current version of node.js that you're using. And you're also going to want to run npm v and hit enter. And that will show you the current version of npm that you're using. Now, I am using the current version, which is not the long-term support version currently, but I wanted to use a later version just to make sure that this course was relevant for as long as possible. So anyway, as long as you can run those commands and you see a version that's at least somewhat similar to the ones that I have here, you should be good to go. Alright. So we're going to be starting off here by building the front end of our blog site using React. Now you may be wondering why we choose to use React instead of just creating our site using basic HTML, CSS and JavaScript. Well, React has a lot of advantages over hand coding a static site. And the main advantage is that it makes creating a website much simpler and faster without taking away any of the fine-grained control from the programmer. Alright. It allows us to create modular reusable components that can then be arranged into a fully functional website instead of hand-coding each individual page in our site. So let's imagine, for example, that we have a blog site with hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of articles such as Medium here. And let's say that we want to add something to all of our pages, right? Like an email sign-up form, or in the case of Medium, something that blocks users from reading articles after they've read 3 articles in a month. Well, if our site was just a static collection of HTML documents, what we'd have to do is actually have as many HTML documents as we had articles on our site. And if we wanted to make some sort of change, right? If we wanted to add a message up here saying this is your last free article, for example, then what we would have to do is actually make that change across all of our HTML files, which would be a very unpleasant and time-intensive task. Alright. So that's one of the main reasons that we use React, is to make that sort of thing much easier. Now, the next question is why you'd use React over other platforms like WordPress or Wix or Squarespace that provide you with a more drag-and-drop approach to building websites, usually without writing any code. Well, first of all, since this course is primarily aimed at developers, if you want to create a blog and you're not already a fairly strong developer, I would actually recommend that you use one of these platforms instead of React, since it'll probably end up being much more difficult for you in the long run if you try and create a code-based site with React if you haven't yet mastered basic coding. Alright. So another question is why you choose React over other web libraries and frameworks like Angular or Vue. And the answer to this question is that it kind of depends on why you're asking, right? If you're trying to figure out which one of these, React or Angular or Vue, or one of the many other front-end libraries that are out there, is best for you, then I'd say that at the end of the day, the only way to really know for sure is to try all 3. Alright. Now, if you're trying to figure out which one you should learn for career reasons, however, I would strongly recommend React. Now, I'm not exactly sure what the actual statistics for this are. You're free to Google that for yourself, but personally I see a lot more companies using React than any of the other major front-end libraries. Okay. So all that being said, React is a fantastic tool for programmers who want to create basically any type of web application. And with the advent of libraries like React Native, it's rapidly becoming a tool for creating mobile apps as well. Alright, now, because of this, React developers are currently very highly sought after and generally highly paid as well by companies who are looking to modernize their web apps or stay ahead of the curve. So with all of that knowledge, let's move on and see how we can quickly set up a React-powered blog site. Alright. So the fastest way to set up a React app from scratch is usually by using a generator, right? It is possible to create a React app from scratch without using a generator, but it can be kind of a lengthy process and it involves some extra things that we're not really going to be talking about here. So there are several generators that you can use, all of which take nearly all of the work out of getting a React site up and running, which is pretty great, right? So in this video what we're going to do is use Create React App, which is a not very creatively named open source React app generator which is published, I believe, by Facebook. And it's currently one of the most popular and common ways to create a new React application. So to set up our project, what you're going to want to do is open up Visual Studio Code or whatever IDE you're using. And you're going to want to open up the integrated terminal in your IDE. And if your IDE happens to not have an integrated terminal, you'll probably just want to use iTerm or something like that, or your computer's built-in terminal, which you can usually find by just searching for terminal. Like so, okay? So anyway, once you've opened up the terminal, the next thing that you're going to want to do is navigate to wherever you want your project to be created. Right? I just have mine inside a folder called Courses. And once you're in the right location, you can create your React app by typing the following command. And it is npx create react app. And this is going to be followed by the name of the app that you want to create, right? So since we're going to be creating a blog application here, I'm going to call this my blog, and we're going to hit enter, and that should generate that project for us, right? So it's going to basically create a new folder called my blog, and it's going to create all of the necessary React boilerplate files and install all of the necessary dependencies for us. And that's all there is to it. So now that we've run the create React app command, what you should see if you list out your files in this directory is that we now have a new directory called my blog. And what you're going to want to do is open that up in your IDE so that we can take a look at some of the files. So let's open up courses and my blog. And when we click open here, we should see that, sure enough, we have a lot of files over here on the side, and we'll discuss what each of these is very shortly, but first let's see how to run this React app. And to do that, you're just going to want to open up a terminal and make sure that it's inside the my blog directory or whatever you decided to call your project. And you're going to run npm start, or you can also run npm run start. Those are really just aliases for the same command. And what that's going to do is it's going to build all of the files in our React project and host them. And you'll be able to see the React app in action. You just have to wait a minute here, in your browser at localhost :3000. Alright. So that's how to create and run a React app. And we were able to do all of that in a very short period of time, which again is one of the major advantages of using React app generators, like Create React App. So all we have to do now is modify the default code that Create React App gave us in order to make it into whatever application we're trying to build. So let's take a quick look at the project that it's created for us, right? We saw that it created quite a few files for us inside our My Blog folder. And what you're going to notice is inside this folder, besides things like package.json, which just contains information about our project, and package lock.json, which is a pretty in-depth look at all of the dependencies in our project. We also have these two folders which are called public and source. Alright, now the public directory contains some of the things that Create React App has put there by default, right? So you'll see this index.html file, which is the HTML entry point for our app. And you'll also see this manifest.json file in here, which is used with mobile phones. And I'm not going to go into too much detail on the contents of this folder here, but there's plenty of information on React's website or just on the web in general, if you're interested in it. Now, the other directory that we have here, remember, is the source directory. And this is where the bulk of our blog's code is going to go. So we have this app.js component, which is what's called the root component for our blog site, right? This is basically the component in React that is going to contain the rest of the components that we build. Alright. Now, in addition to this main component code, we also have the CSS and test files that go along with that component. And you know, those of you who are big fans of test-driven development are going to have to forgive me on this, but we're not actually going to be using tests in these videos, since testing React projects is just beyond the scope of this course. And for the time being, we don't really need to worry about the rest of the files in this directory. It's mostly just boilerplate code that Create React App has set up for us. Alright. Now you're going to notice also that there's a gitignore file inside this folder, and that's there because in addition to generating all of these files for us, Create React App has also initialized this directory as a GitHub repo, so that, you know, as you make changes you'll be able to commit and push your code to GitHub. If that's what you want to do, of course. Alright. So now that we've got a very basic React app up and running, the next thing that we're going to do is make a few changes to the app component, which currently is the only component in our React application. So if you open up app.js, what you're going to see is inside this app component, we have all of the JSX, right? That's the HTML-like syntax that React uses to define interfaces defined for our application. And basically all that this is right now is the little spinning logo thing. That's line 8 right here. We have this little message saying edit source/app.js and save to reload, which is just the message that's displayed underneath it. And then we have a link that takes us to the React documentation. Now, none of this stuff is really relevant currently for our blog app that we want to build. So what I'm going to do is just delete everything here except for the surrounding app div. Alright. What we're going to be doing now is we're going to be defining some of the interface for our blog inside this div, and here's what that's going to look like. All we're going to do is at the top, we'll create an H1 heading, and inside there, we'll say something like my awesome blog. And then underneath that, we're going to have the actual body of our site. This is where we'll be rendering the pages, as you'll see very shortly. And for this, we're just going to create a div which will give the ID of page body to. This is going to be for styling that we'll be adding later on, as you'll see. And then inside here, we'll just say something like welcome to my blog, and that's really all we need to do. Again, what we're going to be doing later is actually creating pages that will be rendered in this part of our app. And we'll see how to do that very shortly. But for now, this should allow us to at least make sure that we've removed all of the correct code. And it will also allow us to add a little bit of styling, as you'll see in just a minute. So we can also delete this logo import since we're not using that logo SVG anymore. And in fact, if you just want to delete that from the folder here, from the source folder, you can just say delete, and that will get rid of logo.svg and save us a little bit of space there. Cool, so now that we've edited our app component, what we should be able to do is run our application again, and you may still have this running from before. So if you do, you can just leave it running. You don't have to restart it in order to see the changes and react, as you probably know by now, but if it's not running, you can run it again by saying npm start or npm run start, and we should see our updated app in a browser. So what you're going to see is that this stuff will disappear, and we'll now have my awesome blog and welcome to my blog rendered. And yeah, it's not much yet, but it's a really good start, because the next thing that we're going to do is add some of our own styles. So in order to make the styling as easy as possible for this application, what I'm going to recommend you do is copy the CSS from the GitHub repo for this course. And you can find that inside app CSS in the GitHub repo, and all you need to do is open up your own app CSS file. You can then copy the CSS from the GitHub repo and paste it in here, which I'm going to do right now from another window. Alright, there we go. And as you can see, this is all of the CSS for our app. So this will just all automatically get applied as we build out our application and add things like IDs and class names to the different elements that we define. Alright. So if we go back to our app again, you're going to see that the styling has changed very slightly, and don't worry too much about how it looks now, because we're going to be making quite a few important changes to our app later on as we go about developing the different pages, the nav bar, etc. So anyway, that's how to set up our app component. The next thing that we're going to do is start creating our different pages and see how to add routing to our app.
Alright, at this point we have the app component, which is the uppermost component in our React application defined, and we've also added styling for our applications. So the next step for us is going to be to create all of our applications pages. And once we have those created and displaying on the same route, which we'll see how to do very shortly, we'll be able to actually go through each page and implement it individually. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is inside this source directory, let's create a new folder, and we'll call this folder Pages. And as you might guess by the name, this is where we're going to be creating all of the individual components for our pages on our blog site. Alright. So in React, pages of a site are usually just regular components. There's not a special type of component that we have to use in order to make pages in React. So anyway, what we're going to do is create one component for each page that we want in our application. And for now there's going to be 5 main pages. The first one is going to be the home page. This is going to be the sort of landing page for our applications. So what we're going to do is name this homepage.js and hit enter. And we'll come back in just a minute and add some basic code to this page, but first let's add the rest of our pages. So the next one is going to be the About page. As you might guess, this is going to be the page that gives users more information about our site and allows us to sort of tell our story there. After that we're going to create the Articles list page. Now this page is going to, as you might guess by the name, contain a list of all of the articles on our site. So let's hit enter there and create that component. And the next one is going to be the actual individual article page, which we'll just call articlepage.js. This is going to be the actual page where users will be able to see the content of the article and read the article. And finally, we're going to create one last page, and this is going to be the Not Found page. Now this page is going to be a little bit different from the other pages, as you'll see, because we're only going to want to display it when the user is on a route that we don't have a page for, but for now don't worry too much about this page. We'll come back to that when we actually see how to add a not found page to our app. Okay. So for now we have these 4 pages: About page, Article page, Articles list page and Home page. So what we're going to do is we're just going to define a very simple interface for each of these pages that will allow us to know which page we're currently looking at. Alright, so for the home page, we're just going to say const homepage, and we're going to define all of these components in our application as function components. It is possible to define them as class components, but that's rapidly becoming a pretty outmoded practice. So we're going to be defining these all as function components. So let's say const homepage, and the body of the component's going to be pretty straightforward. We're just going to say return, and we'll have an h1 heading that says this is the homepage. Okay, and once we've defined that, we're just going to export this as the default export by saying export default homepage. That should export the homepage component so that we can import it into our app component later on and actually display it. Cool. So that's the homepage. Let's copy this now, and what we're going to do is basically just the same thing for about page. We'll just change the name of this to about page and change the text here to say, this is the about page, and same thing down here, export default, about page, and you get the idea. We're just going to do that same thing for our other 2 pages. So for our articles list page, we're going to say, const articles list page and articles list page. And then we're going to say, of course in the text, this is the articles list page. And last but not least, we'll do this for the article page. We're just going to paste this, replace about with article, replace the text here with this is the article page, and down here we'll say export default article page. Cool. So our pages are very simple right now. And the point of this is that it's going to allow us to make sure that we set up the routing for our application correctly. So let's take a look at how that's done. What we're going to do is head back to our app.js component. And we'll start off here by importing all of our pages. So we'll say import homepage from pages homepage. And if you're lucky, your IDE will help you out here and just type most of that out for you, as mine is doing. Alright, then we'll import the about page. We'll import the articles list page, and last but not least we'll import the article page. Cool. So now that we have all of these pages, the next thing that we're going to need to do is make sure that each of the pages gets displayed when we're on the correct route, right? Ideally what we'll want is when we're just looking at localhost 3000, which is the base route for our app, we'll want to see the homepage content here. When we're on the path like localhost 3000/about, we'll obviously want to see the about page, and same thing for the articles list page and the article page. So we'll see how to do this using a package called React Router. But first let's just display each of these pages inside our app component. What we're going to do is remove this, welcome to my blog, and in its place, we're going to display all 4 of these pages. So we'll say homepage, like so. Then we'll display the about page, and then we'll display the articles list page and the article page just by specifying their JSX tags like I've done here. Cool. So now that we have all of that in place, let's just go back to our browser and we should see our updated app, and sure enough, all of the pages are being displayed in our app at the same time. Now this is obviously not what we want. So the next thing that we're going to have to do, as I said, is make sure that each page is only rendered when we're at the correct route up here in our browser. So the way that we do that is by using a package called React Router DOM, and we can install that into our project by stopping our app. And you can stop your app, by the way, just by pressing Ctrl+C. And we can say, npm install React Router DOM and hit enter, and that will install that package for us. So now that we've installed the React Router DOM package, what we're going to need to do is import some stuff from it. And basically these are all going to be components that will allow us to define when these pages get displayed. So there's actually 3 main components that we need to import. The first is going to be Browser Router. And these are all from React Router DOM, which we just installed. And then we're going to say routes, and finally we'll say route cool. So now that we have those 3 components imported, what we're going to do is first of all we need to wrap the entire user interface of our application in a browser router, right? That component we just imported. And then in order to define when each of these pages gets displayed, we're going to need to wrap them all inside a routes component. So we'll put that there and put all of our pages inside of there like so. And last but not least, for each of these pages we're going to need to define a separate route component. That's going to look like this. We're going to say route. And then as a prop, we're going to say path. And the value of this prop is going to be the exact path that we want this page to get displayed at. So for our home page, for example, we want that to be displayed on the home route. So the path here is going to be /. Alright. And as a second prop, we're going to need to define a prop called element. And that's going to be how we define which page and really which JSX elements in general are going to be displayed at that path. So in this case, what we're doing is we're saying when the path is equal to /, when we're at the home route, we want to display this JSX inside this portion of our interface. Okay, so now we just need to do the same thing for the rest of our pages. So we'll say route, and for our about page the path will be /about, and for the element we'll just say equals about page like so. And then for our articles list page, same thing. We're going to say route, the path for this one is going to be /articles. And then for the element we'll say equals articles list page. And oops, I forgot to close the quotation marks there we go. And last but not least we have our article page, and the path for this one is going to be a little bit different. We're going to say /articles, and after that we're going to say /article ID. Alright, and this is something that's referred to as a URL parameter. We'll look at that in much more detail later on. So for now, don't worry about it. And then last but not least we just need to say element equals article page. And that should be all we need to do for our routes. So let's run our application again if it's not currently running. And what we should be able to see is if we go back to our browser, each of the pages will now only be displayed when we're at the correct URL, right? So you can see that when we're at the regular /route, we're now at the home page. If we go to /about and hit enter, we'll see that we're now at the about page. If we go to the /articles route, we'll see the articles list page. And if we go to /articles/anything, you can just type anything in there that you want, we'll see the article page. And just to give you a hint at what this is the URL parameter that we're going to see how to use later. Cool. So at this point we have all of the pages in our application defined and we're displaying them on the correct routes.